"Put that rod down right now." That was the HOA president screaming at me across the dock, as if I were waving around a rifle instead of showing my son how to fish. According to her, a fishing pole suddenly counted as some sort of weapon. One minute I was patiently teaching Noah how to bait a hook, and the next, I had a $600 fine shoved into my hands while neighbors recorded us like it was the newest episode of a drama series. And when she pulled out her phone to dial 911, I realized this had nothing to do with fishing. It was about control. That morning had started out so simple. Noah had been begging me all week to finally teach him how to fish properly, and I promised we'd go down to the community lake. The sunrise painted the water in gold, and the surface shimmered with gentle ripples. Noah had his tackle box neatly organized, every lure sorted by color and size, and his excitement was contagious. I had just begun showing him how to cast when he suddenly pointed behind me, his eyes wide. Broken bar, who are those people? I turned around and saw a white golf cart barreling down the path like it was some sort of police raid. The cart screeched to a halt just a few feet away, and 3 people jumped out with unnecessary urgency. Leading them was Gloria Hale, the 55-year-old HOA president, hair perfectly styled, striding toward us like she was heading up an official investigation. 2 neighbors trailed behind her, one already holding his phone up and live streaming the entire scene for the community's gossip page. The caption under his video read, "Catching a rule breaker in action." Comments started flooding in instantly. "Excuse me." Gloria's sharp voice cut through the air. "Are you Justin Bennett?" I nodded, baffled at how she even knew my name or why she seemed so furious about me fishing with my son. "I'm Gloria Hale, president of the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association. You are in direct violation of our regulations." She gestured toward me and Noah as though we were dangerous suspects finally caught. She marched closer, brimming with authority. "Do you even realize what time it is, Mr. Bennett?" I checked my watch. "It's 7:30. "Exactly," she snapped, smirking. "You're violating quiet hours before 8 a.m. This isn't about your license, it's about community standards." I pulled out my valid state fishing license, hoping to clear up the misunderstanding. She barely glanced at it before dismissing it with a wave of her hand. The neighbor's phone kept recording as Gloria reached into her blazer and pulled out what looked like an official document. She thrust it toward me with triumph. "You are hereby fined $150 for disturbing quiet hours, plus $450 in legal processing and investigation fees." I blinked at the total. $600? For fishing 30 minutes early. Her smirk only widened as her companions exchanged smug glances. "Processing fees are standard. Perhaps you'll think twice before ignoring the rules again." Noah tugged on my sleeve, whispering nervously, Broken bar, are we in trouble?" His voice cracked with fear, and anger welled up in my chest. This was supposed to be a bonding morning, not a spectacle. Gloria, unmoved, pulled out her phone. "Since you refuse to cooperate, I'm calling the authorities," she declared loudly, making sure the live stream caught every word. My heart raced as I realized she was actually calling 911 over fishing rods. "Yes, I need to report a dangerous trespasser who is threatening residents at Meadowbrook Lake," she told the dispatcher with exaggerated panic. Noah's little hands trembled, and his fishing rod slipped onto the dock with a loud clatter. I wrapped an arm around him, trying to stay calm even as fury burned in me. All I could think was how quickly this could spiral out of control. If I ended up arrested for teaching my kid how to fish, the local news would eat it up. Meanwhile, the neighbor continued narrating for his live stream like it was some reality show. Gloria hung up and turned to us with a satisfied grin. "The police are on their way. I suggest you pack up your gear and prepare to explain yourselves." What began as a peaceful morning at the lake had turned into a public trial. What started as a peaceful morning had now spiraled into a nightmare. All I wanted was to share some quiet time with my son by the water, but instead we were being watched like criminals by 3 HOA representatives. They stood there as if we might suddenly flee the scene or destroy evidence of our so-called violation. Gloria kept glancing at her watch impatiently, while the neighbor's livestream continued to broadcast our humiliation to the entire community. Noah pressed closer to me, his voice trembling. Broken bar, are they going to take you away?" The fear in his tone shattered me. I knew this moment would etch itself into his memory. a scar he'd carry for years. I tried to reassure him that everything would be okay, though in truth, I wasn't sure what would happen next. It felt surreal, like we had stepped into some twisted version of reality where teaching your child to fish was a punishable offense. Gloria, on the other hand, looked intent on making us an example, and I couldn't predict how far she was willing to push this. Looking back, I should have known this was only the beginning. The distant wail of police sirens confirmed it. Moments later, 2 patrol cars appeared, their flashing lights bouncing across the lake. Out stepped 2 officers, one older, with gray at his temples and weary eyes that hinted at decades of dealing with neighborhood disputes, the other young, eager, and clearly still trying to prove himself. Gloria hurried toward them like she had been waiting for this performance all along, waving her citation like it was a smoking gun. "Officers, thank goodness you came," she announced with dramatic urgency. "This man has trespassed on community property, violated quiet hour rules, and refused to cooperate with lawful HOA authority." She gestured toward Noah and me as though we were dangerous fugitives cornered after a long chase. The officers approached cautiously, clearly expecting a hostile situation. Instead, they found a bewildered father with a tackle box and a trembling 12-year-old boy holding a fishing pole. Still, the younger officer instinctively reached for his handcuffs before bothering to look at any paperwork, as though an arrest was the only way to settle things. My throat tightened. I wanted to protest, but the glint of the metal cuffs froze me. Noah saw the movement toward the restraints and broke down sobbing, his tackle box slipping from his hands and scattering bright lures across the dock. "Please don't arrest my dad," he cried, his voice cracking with desperation. The heartbreaking scene seemed to be exactly the kind of spectacle Gloria had hoped for. The older officer quickly raised his hand to stop his partner. "Hold on," he said firmly, his gaze shifting to Noah's tear-streaked face. The boy's distress had clearly struck a chord with him. Turning to me, the senior officer asked, "Let me get this straight. You were fishing with a valid state license, but you started half an hour before the HOA's designated time?" I nodded, relieved someone was finally applying logic to the chaos. I handed him both my fishing license and identification, hoping this would clear things up before the situation escalated further. He examined the documents carefully, his expression skeptical as he compared them to Gloria's citation. "This license is valid and current," he observed at last, his tone edged with doubt about the severity of the supposed crime. But Gloria wasn't finished. She stepped forward with newfound authority, reciting community rules like scripture. "Section 12.4 of our guidelines clearly prohibits recreational lake use before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m. This ensures residents with unusual work schedules have guaranteed quiet hours for rest." She even handed over a laminated copy, proof that she carried the rules like a weapon. The younger officer still looked convinced handcuffs were necessary, fingers twitching near his belt, while Gloria continued to cut off any attempt I made to explain. Gloria demanded that the officers arrest me immediately, insisting that I was guilty of community disruption and illegal trespassing during quiet hours. Her frustration grew every second they didn't jump to her side. Meanwhile, the neighbor with his phone kept narrating the whole scene like it was some low-budget reality show for his online audience. "Arrest him now," Gloria barked when the officers kept reviewing my paperwork instead of cuffing me on the spot. "This man is blatantly ignoring community standards and must face the consequences." The older officer's eyes scanned the quiet lakeside, birds chirping, water rippling gently, nothing remotely chaotic. His skeptical expression said it all. "Ma'am," he finally replied, voice heavy with fatigue, "this neighborhood calls us more often than people order pizza." His younger partner added quietly, "And most of these calls turn out to be false alarms. We've had several reports from this HOA address that didn't amount to anything." Relief washed over me. At least they were starting to see past Gloria's performance. Still, the neighbor filming continued with his dramatic narration. "This is what protecting community values looks like. Some folks think they're above the rules, but we need strong HOA leadership to keep order." The livestream comments scrolled faster, viewers bickering over whether this level of enforcement was justified. Gloria grew more desperate, her voice rising. I called 911 because this man was trespassing on community property and refused to comply with lawful regulations. If we let residents pick and choose which rules they want to follow, the entire structure of our neighborhood collapses. The younger officer inspected Noah's fishing gear one last time, then turned to me with firm clarity. "Sir, your license is valid, and fishing with proper paperwork in a community lake isn't trespassing. This timing issue may be a matter for the HOA, but it's not a criminal matter requiring police involvement." Gloria's jaw dropped. Noah's tears finally slowed as he looked up at me, confusion and relief mixing together. "Are we really okay, Dad?" he asked in a trembling voice that broke me all over again. I knelt down and hugged him. "We didn't do anything wrong," I reassured him, though I could already see how deeply this experience had scarred him. What should have been a simple fishing lesson had turned into a frightening encounter with authority. Even as the officers headed back to their vehicles, clearly annoyed at being dragged into another HOA drama, Gloria refused to let it end. "This is unacceptable," she yelled after them. "You're not doing your jobs if you let rule breakers get away without punishment." The older officer stopped and turned back, his patience gone. "Ma'am, handle future HOA disputes through civil channels, not emergency services," he said sharply. The neighbor finally lowered his phone, disappointed that the spectacle hadn't ended in handcuffs or drama worth replaying. The other woman, who had stood silently through the ordeal, simply shook her head and walked back to the golf cart, clearly embarrassed. Gloria, however, stayed rooted to the dock, fuming that her grand plan to publicly humiliate us had fizzled. As Noah and I walked home, he asked softly why Gloria had been so angry about us fishing. I tried to explain about HOA rules, but the truth was, I didn't understand it myself. It all felt like an extreme overreaction, and a part of me suspected something personal was driving her anger. That evening, the older officer's words stuck in my mind of frequent calls, false reports. Maybe this wasn't an isolated incident. Maybe there was a larger pattern of abuse of power here. And then there was Gloria's confident $600 citation. The way she delivered it made it feel rehearsed, calculated. If she thought this was a game she could win, maybe it was time I flipped the board entirely. Maybe I could turn this so-called debt into my weapon. Later that night, after Rachel tucked Noah into bed, still shaken from everything, I sat in my home office. My background in journalism made digging through public documents second nature, and thanks to my grandmother's inheritance, I finally had the resources to push deeper. I opened the property records database and began searching. Something about the way Gloria confidently waived that $600 fine in my face kept gnawing at me. It felt staged, almost like she had been waiting for the perfect opportunity to make an example out of Samyania, and I was the unlucky target. I decided to dig into the HOA's financial records, which technically should be opened for all residents to see. What I uncovered made my stomach twist. The community's lake management contract showed months of overdue payments, 6 months worth, to be exact. Letter after letter, each one stamped in bold red overdue, piling up to a debt of $15,000. Anyone could see trouble was brewing beneath the surface of our so-called peaceful neighborhood. The deeper I went, the uglier it got. Clearwater Lake Management had been sending certified warnings to the HOA for months, threatening to cut ties. Not a single word of this had been shared during community meetings. Instead, Gloria had hidden every notice while still collecting our monthly fees, money that homeowners assumed was being used for lake upkeep and services. I printed every document I could find, spreading the pages across my desk like puzzle pieces. The correspondence from Clearwater was clear. If the debt wasn't paid within 60 days of their final notice, they would terminate the agreement and strip us of community lake access. Even without a law degree, it didn't take much to understand we were in serious legal trouble. The most alarming detail came straight from the contract itself. It spelled out that if payments lagged more than 90 days, Clearwater had the right to revoke all resident access and partner with outside parties instead. We were already past that point, yet Gloria hadn't said a word about the crisis looming over us. Rachel returned from her evening walk to find me buried under printouts. Her eyes widened at the mess on the desk. "What are you planning?" she asked, catching the determined look on my face. I explained the overdue debt and showed her the stamped letters. she gasped. "We're raising our son in the middle of this nightmare. What if we could fix it?" Her words sparked something inside me. I opened my bank account and stared at the inheritance my grandmother had left me just 3 months earlier. She always told me to use resources wisely and to stand up for what was right. The $15,000 was no small amount, but it was money I could lose if it meant shielding my family from more harassment. Part of me questioned my own sanity for even considering pouring my inheritance into what felt like a financial black hole. But the more I thought about it, the clearer the picture became. If I paid off the HOA's debt to Clearwater, maybe I could negotiate protections for my family. At the very least, I would have leverage in future confrontations with Gloria, and Noah could enjoy fishing without fear of more traumatic encounters. I spent the next hour combing through property law and HOA regulations. The legal language was a labyrinth, but one fact stood out. Whoever controlled their relationship with Clearwater Lake Management controlled access and usage of the lake. That kind of influence could change everything. Rachel sat beside me, scanning the documents. "Justin, if Gloria has been hiding debts this big, what else is she keeping from everyone?" she asked, her concern deepening. "And even if you pay it, how do we know she won't find another way to target us?" She was right. These were questions I had to consider before making such a risky move. Among my grandmother's papers had been a handwritten note, urging me to use the inheritance for something meaningful, something that protected the people I loved. I'd assumed she meant college funds or home repairs. Now I wondered if this was the challenge she had foreseen. To be sure, I called my friend Mike, a lawyer, and laid out the situation. He cautioned me about the legal complexity but admitted that if I could negotiate favorable terms with Clearwater, it could shield us from future HOA harassment. He offered to review any agreements before I signed, which reassured me enough to keep going. As I organized the documents into a proper timeline, a disturbing pattern became undeniable. Gloria had been collecting money from residents, ignoring the lake spills, and compensating by ramping up her enforcement tactics. The $600 fine Gloria slapped on me suddenly looked like a distraction, a smokescreen to cover the much deeper mess she had created with her reckless handling of community funds. Rachel studied the bank records and letters again before finally voicing what we were both thinking. "If we don't step in, Gloria will just keep going after families like ours while burying the real problems," she said firmly. "Maybe paying this debt isn't only about Noah anymore. Maybe it's about protecting the entire neighborhood from her corruption." The final confirmation I needed came through a public records search of HOA board filings. There it was in black and white. Gloria had never disclosed the Clearwater debt during the required quarterly financial reviews. That wasn't just careless, it was a breach of her legal duty to the residents. Now I had leverage if I decided to confront her directly. By midnight, the whole picture was clear. The $15,000 debt was only the beginning. If Clearwater canceled our lake contract, property values would tank, and families would lose the main amenity they had invested in when they bought their homes. The memory of Noah's terrified face that morning hardened my resolve. Gloria had humiliated my son while concealing a crisis that could tear apart our community. This debt wasn't just a liability, it was a weapon. 2 days later, Gloria convened an emergency HOA meeting. The community center was packed tighter than I'd ever seen. She strutted to the front with a slideshow already queued up. Blown-up photos of me in fishing shorts with Noah appeared on the screen, displayed like mugshots in a trial. Theatrics were clearly her game tonight. Dressed in a sharp navy suit, clutching a laser pointer, she addressed the crowd with the gravity of a politician. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to address a serious threat to our community standards," she declared. "This individual believes he can flout our regulations without consequence, setting a dangerous example of lawlessness." The cropped photos made my father-son fishing trip look like some sinister act. She waved her laser pointer across the images, narrating like a prosecutor before a jury. "Here we see violations of quiet towers. Here we see prohibited activities. Here we see disregard for hard-working residents who deserve peace. If fishing with my kid was criminal, then half the state deserved jail time." The absurdity might have been funny if it weren't so chilling. I noticed neighbors shifting uneasily, questioning whether the spectacle fit the supposed offense. Rachel sat near the back, taking notes. When the floor opened for questions, She casually asked neighbors about special lake maintenance fees. That's when cracks began to show us. Some households had been billed. Others had never received notices. Has anyone else noticed inconsistencies in HOA communications? She asked innocently. Heads turned. Residents compared experiences, and a troubling pattern surfaced. Families with kids racked up violations and fines. Older residents without pets or outdoor activities, almost never cited. Gloria tried to brush it off. Different households require different levels of oversight, she claimed. But her vague excuse only fueled suspicion. Mrs. Chen, an elderly neighbor, raised her trembling hand. I've walked by that lake every morning for 5 years and never had a citation. Why are fishing families treated differently than walking families? The question exposed the arbitrary way Gloria enforced rules. Her face flushed as she scrambled for an answer. Different activities carry different risks to community harmony, she said vaguely. No one bought it. The room stirred with whispers. Then young Mr. Rodriguez spoke up. Speaking of property values, can you update us on the amenities budget? Where exactly is our money for lake management going? Gloria stiffened. Financial records are available during business hours. Tonight's meeting is about rule violations, not accounting. Too late. The seed of doubt was planted. Residents began demanding answers about budgets and contracts. I rose slowly, letting the silence settle before I spoke. Gloria, you may want to double-check who's actually paying for this lake before you make any more threats. The words hung in the air. I didn't reveal everything, but the implication landed like a punch. The room went dead quiet. Neighbors leaned forward, their curiosity piqued. Gloria faltered for the first time all night. Mr. Bennett, your personal finances have no bearing on community rules, she shot back, but the edge in her voice was gone. Her authority cracked. Meanwhile, Rachel pressed on, gathering more stories from neighbors about inconsistent notices and fees. The picture that formed was devastating. Conflicting information, selective enforcement, and residents shut out of financial decisions. The meeting unraveled into arguments. Parents worried about biased rule enforcement. Older residents fretted over property values and hidden debts. Finally, George Miller, who had lived here more than 20 years, stood up. His calm, steady voice cut through the noise. In all my years, I've never seen this level of division over such trivial issues, he said. Something has changed in how this HOA runs, and not for the better. We need to get back to solving real problems. By the end, Gloria's attempt to shame me had backfired spectacularly. Instead of weakening me, she had exposed the cracks in her leadership. Afterward, several neighbors approached Rachel and me, sharing their own run-ins with harassment and arbitrary fines. It became painfully clear our fishing citation wasn't an isolated incident. It was just another symptom of Gloria's reckless authority and shady financial management that was tearing the community apart. Maybe being cornered wasn't a setback at all, and maybe it was the perfect chance to act. The morning after Gloria's chaotic home meeting, I drove to Clearwater Lake Management headquarters. I wanted Aunt Cirsa and Leveragia before she had another chance to tighten her grip on the community. At first, the representative I spoke with looked doubtful when I brought up the association's mounting debt. Are you even authorized to negotiate on behalf of the board? He asked, eyebrows raised. I explained that I wasn't part of the leadership, just a homeowner with the means and determination to resolve the issue. His skepticism shifted into cautious interest when I mentioned my inheritance and savings, showing that I had real money available. Most people call begging for payment extensions, he admitted, almost impressed. It's rare to meet someone who can actually clear a balance outright. He laid out the history: months of overdue notices, ignored certified letters, and empty promises from Gloria. She had been stringing them along, threatening legal action every time Clearwater threatened to cancel the contract. The frustration in his voice was obvious. Honestly, we're sick of the broken promises and hostility. If you can pay off the debt, we'd gladly hand you exclusive authority over the lake. I immediately consulted my lawyer, who confirmed that under state property law, it was legal for a third party to pay another organization's debt in exchange for contractual rights. Risky, yes, but perfectly valid. He cautioned me about the long-term consequences, but admitted that if I secured strong terms, it could shield my family permanently from HOA harassment. The negotiations stretched nearly 3 hours. Every detail mattered: their responsibilities, protections, future contingencies. Clearwater, clearly desperate for resolution, warmed quickly to the idea of working with someone reliable. I put forward my proposal. I'd pay the full $15,000 debt immediately in exchange for a 99-year exclusive contract granting me legal control over lake access and usage policies. Signing away a piece of my grandmother's legacy for this deal. Was I rescuing us, or throwing good money into the deep end? "This is exactly what we've been hoping for," the representative said, relieved. "A responsible party who values obligations and stability." By the time I signed the papers, the agreement was sealed. Lake Access Authority no longer belonged to the HOA, it belonged to me. And while I was at Clearwater's office cementing the deal, Gloria was already plotting her next move, doubling down on her campaign to crush us. Gloria's obsession with destroying my family crossed into criminal territory. She started producing forged prohibition notices with counterfeit government seals and fabricated maintenance invoices, claiming federal authority to collect additional fees. To the untrained eye, the paperwork looked legitimate, but the inconsistencies were glaring. Neighbors later admitted they had seen her personally pinning up these fake restrictions and invoices on community bulletin boards. She told anyone who would listen that federal agencies had confirmed my violations, banning my family from the lake permanently while demanding emergency fees from certain residents. The scheme was brazen, and also desperate. Meanwhile, at Clearwater, the representative reviewed my documents and confirmed I could transfer the payment right away. "We'll process this today," he assured me, "and tomorrow morning your exclusive management contract will be finalized. That will give you full legal authority to restrict any, including board members who tries to abuse lake access." When I got home, Rachel showed me pictures neighbors had sent of Gloria's forged postings. The forgeries were obvious: clumsy seals, mismatched signatures, glaring errors. Anyone with legal training could see through them, and several residents had. Word spread quickly that Gloria was circulating fraudulent government paperwork while collecting money through bogus invoices. Her credibility was unraveling faster than she realized. That evening, Clearwater called to confirm the debt had been officially cleared. "Congratulations, Mr. Bennett," the rep said. "You now hold exclusive authority over lake management for 99 years. We'll send the signed contract along with documentation of the HOA's prior violations." Should I reveal the contract immediately or let Gloria bury herself further in her own lies? That was the question weighing on me. Rachel and I celebrated quietly, knowing we had flipped the neighborhood's power structure completely. Noah didn't understand the legal side of it, but when we explained no one could stop him from fishing anymore, the relief on his face was obvious. After everything he had endured, that small victory mattered most. But I knew this wasn't over. Timing was critical. If I revealed my authority too soon, Gloria might twist the story. If I waited, I could expose her forged campaign at the exact moment it would shatter her credibility beyond repair. Over the next week, her harassment only intensified. She stationed herself by the lake each morning with a clipboard, recording our movements and photographing Noah every time he stepped outside. She rallied neighbors to shun us, and the hostility spread to Noah's school. He came home one afternoon with "Lake Thief" scrawled across his backpack, graffiti inspired by adults who had parroted Gloria's lies at home. That sight nearly drove me straight to Gloria's doorstep, but Rachel caught my arm, reminding me that losing my temper would only hand her more fuel for her smear campaign. Rachel's grip on my arm kept me from storming over to Gloria. She reminded me that losing control would only give Gloria more ammunition for her vendetta against us. Apparently, community standards now included vandalizing a child's school bag. Broken bar. "Why do the other kids think I'm a criminal?" Noah asked, tears in his eyes. As we scrubbed the marker off his backpack, Rachel uncovered more disturbing signs of Gloria's corruption. She found invoices for so-called lake maintenance FESA signatures didn't match any legitimate resident records. The pattern was unmistakable once she compared notes with neighbors. Families with kids were singled out and charged inflated emergency rates, while Gloria's supporters either paid less or nothing at all. One elderly neighbor confided she had handed over more than $800 in the past year but had never once seen real maintenance being done. It was clear Gloria was running a discriminatory racket. Her desperation escalated further. At the grocery store, she cornered Rachel and loudly accused our family of undermining community harmony. Waving her fake documents in the produce aisle, she declared that federal investigators had flagged us as security risks. Shoppers stopped and stared. The stress was crushing Noah. He developed anxiety about leaving the house and nightmares about police taking us away. Rachel found him sobbing one night, terrified his parents would be arrested because of Gloria's threats. A 12-year-old shouldn't have to live like that. By then, I knew the truth. Gloria's forged prohibition orders weren't just manipulative, they were federal crimes. The counterfeit seals and signatures could carry heavy penalties if I reported her. Rachel's digging revealed even more: over $25,000 stolen from residents through fake maintenance assessments, money funneled straight into her personal account. Embezzlement, forgery, felony upon felony. The breaking point came when she staged a protest outside our house. Supporters held signs screaming "Protect our children from lake violators" while drivers honked non-stop as they passed. The irony was absurd. She was violating actual noise ordinances while pretending to enforce community standards. Noah's teacher soon called, worried about his behavior in class. "He seems distracted and frightened," she said gently. It hit me then. Gloria's war wasn't just against us. She was sabotaging our child's education and mental health. Rachel broke down watching Noah struggle through homework. Overwhelmed by fear, "I can't watch her destroy our son's sense of safety," she sobbed. That was it. I couldn't allow this to continue. At the mailboxes days later, Gloria once again brandished her forged orders, threatening to have federal marshals evict us. I studied their fake seals as sloppy imitations that any real agent would expose in seconds. Neighbors began to take sides, but many confided in us privately about their own experiences. Arbitrary fines, harassment, intimidation. The abuse wasn't just aimed at us. Even George Miller, our elderly neighbor, witnessed one of her confrontations and shook his head. "This isn't leadership," he muttered. That night, Rachel and I made a decision. We would report Gloria's forged documents to federal authorities and her embezzlement scheme to the district attorney. We had the proof of fake seals, fraudulent invoices, misappropriated funds, and her calculated targeting of families like ours. Something was about to break, and I had a feeling it wouldn't be on my side. Instead of another noisy public meeting, I arranged a private showdown at the lake. I invited key neighbors to witness, including George Miller. With a manila folder in hand, I carried the Clearwater contract that gave me exclusive authority. I was ready to reveal it at the perfect moment. The morning air was crisp, the lake reflecting a calm surface that belied the storm about to erupt. Birds chirped in the crisp morning air, as if nature itself was mocking Gloria's endless claims about community disruption. She arrived in her signature navy blazer, clutching yet another stack of forged prohibition orders, clearly ready to continue her harassment. Two supporters tagged along, including the neighbor who had once live-streamed our fishing citation. "Mr. Bennett, you're in violation of federal lake access restrictions," she declared dramatically, waving the fake papers. I stayed calm while she launched into her tired speech about standards. But when she noticed the Clearwater letterhead on my documents, she lunged, trying to snatch them from my hands. Papers scattered across the ground as she frantically waved her forgeries. "Those papers don't matter. Federal restrictions take priority," she shouted, her voice edged with panic. That's when George Miller stepped forward, holding his own manila folder. He had been quietly investigating her financial schemes. "Gloria, I think the neighborhood deserves to know about your special assessment collections," he said evenly. Inside his folder, bank statements, fake invoices, resident testimonies. Neighbors began filming on their phones as his calm, steady evidence stood in stark contrast to her unraveling theatrics. "These are private HOA financial matters," Gloria protested weakly. But her authority was slipping away. The moment turned surreal when Clearwater representatives arrived, accompanied by federal investigators responding to my report. They went straight to work, flashing credentials. "We're here to investigate reports of fraudulent federal documents and financial crimes," the lead agent announced. Gloria's face drained of color. The investigator lifted one of her forged orders. "These seals are fake. Creating false federal documents is a federal crime," he stated, photographing every page. Clearwater's spokesperson added more damning evidence: 12 ignored warning letters, $25,000 in bogus assessments, and no real maintenance. Payments stopped in January, yet Ms. Hale continued billing residents. He confirmed. Gloria stammered denials, but her voice cracked under the weight of mounting proof. Even Mrs. Chen, our elderly neighbor, approached the investigators. "She fined my neighbor $300 for something she ignored when I did it," she testified, showing the discriminatory pattern. "Finally, I stepped forward with my legitimate Clearwater contract. Calmly, I stated, I hold exclusive authority to manage this lake for the next 99 years. That includes banning anyone who disrupts community peace, especially you." The weight of the signed agreement shifted the entire atmosphere. Gloria's supporters stepped back, realizing they had backed a fraud. The neighbor who once live-streamed Noah's citation quickly deleted his posts. "I didn't know she was using fake documents," he muttered. The federal investigators interviewed more residents, building a case that showed a systematic pattern of fraud, targeting families with children, exempting her allies, exploiting fear for money. George added his findings, proving she had deliberately charged hundreds in false violations while protecting her inner circle. As the truth closed in, Gloria made one last desperate stand, shouting about lawsuits even in front of actual federal agents. "You'll all face federal charges for interfering," she screamed. The investigator remained calm. "No, Ms. Hale, you will face charges for document forgery and fraud." Clearwater's representatives backed me up immediately. "Mr. Bennett's contract is valid. He has full authority over lake access and policies," they confirmed. Gloria's empire of lies collapsed right there on the lakeshore. The investigators confirmed that I now had the legal authority to restrict disruptive individuals from lake access and establish fair usage policies. They also announced the HOA's previous agreement had been voided because of unpaid debts and breach of contract. Neighbors who had stayed quiet during Gloria's reign finally began sharing their experiences. Their testimony revealed a pattern of intimidation, selective enforcement, and financial exploitation, all crafted to enrich Gloria while silencing anyone who dared challenge her. Gloria's response was pure chaos. She stormed off, screaming about imaginary lawsuits, while investigators calmly examined her forged papers. The spectacle only reinforced that she had lost control. "Ma'am, you are required to remain available for questioning regarding these charges," one investigator called after her, but she ignored him, walking away in denial. She thought she still had the upper hand. She had no idea what was coming. 3 weeks later, I found myself in a courtroom. Gloria's attorney tried to argue my contract was invalid, but the judge reviewed every piece of evidence via Clearwater's records, the investigators' reports of forgery, and the embezzlement trail. There sat Gloria, no longer in her navy blazer, but in an orange jumpsuit. The fall from self-styled community tyrant to federal defendant was complete. After carefully considering the facts, the judge ruled without hesitation. This contract was executed lawfully and in good faith by Mr. Bennett, who settled debts concealed from residents. The defendant's fraudulent behavior and breach of fiduciary duty leave no grounds for invalidation. Gloria was ordered to repay $25,000 to residents she had defrauded and sentenced to 2 years of probation for forging federal documents. Additional embezzlement and conspiracy charges were still pending as investigators combed through her financial dealings. The defendant systematically abused her authority, defrauding her community while fabricating documents to maintain control, the judge stated firmly during sentencing. Meanwhile, Clearwater saw an opportunity to end years of headaches. Their president explained, "We'd rather partner with a responsible individual than another dysfunctional hoe." The company agreed to sell me the lake for $45,000, $15,000 below market value because they trusted I would manage it properly. They once fined me $600 for fishing. I responded by buying the lake outright. "You've already proven your responsibility and commitment to this community," they told me. "We believe the lake is in safe hands under your ownership." The fallout in our neighborhood was swift. residents convened a special meeting to vote on dissolving the HOA entirely. Sick of the corruption and dysfunction Gloria had left behind, George Miller summed it up best: "We need to move beyond this nightmare and create something healthier." The motion passed overwhelmingly. HOA signs were taken down, replaced with simple community guidelines that residents drafted together. The focus shifted to real concerns of safety, property upkeep, and cooperation rather than petty restrictions and arbitrary fines. Mrs. Chen smiled as the last of Gloria's rules came down. "We don't need one person dictating our lives. We're capable of governing ourselves. Would you spend your inheritance to buy peace, or would you have walked away?" Noah still carried the weight of what had happened. Even as we walked to the lake with our fishing gear, he hesitated. "What if someone else tries to stop us?" he asked nervously, memories of police and Gloria's bullying still haunting him. I reassured him, "No one can interfere with us anymore. This lake and the land around it belong to our family now." Rachel finally let out a breath she had been holding for months. "I can't believe we went from a $600 fine to owning the entire lake," she said, astonished. The irony was sharp. Gloria's obsession with control had ended with us gaining everything she once claimed as her kingdom. I posted signs around the lake's edge: private property and no HOA access. Trespassing details were listed, but what stood out most was the line, "Fishing welcome for authorized families." Noah helped me hammer them in, finally realizing he could enjoy his favorite hobby without fear. Soon after, neighbors who had also suffered under Gloria's petty punishments came asking if they could use the lake. I set simple, fair rules focused on safety and environmental care, not discrimination or intimidation. "Everyone deserves peaceful recreation without harassment," I explained to families who had once been her targets. The new system brought a sense of togetherness that had never existed under Gloria's rule. Families laughed, fished, and strolled without worry of being fined. Children splashed at the shoreline while parents relaxed, finally free from manufactured drama. One elderly neighbor, scammed by Gloria's fake fees, received her refund from the restitution fund. Tears welled in her eyes. "I never thought I'd see that money again," she said. "Having an honest person in charge makes such a difference." Justice gave Hira and the whole community closure. George Miller naturally stepped into a guiding role, resolving disputes with conversation instead of threats. "Most problems can be solved through respect," he observed. His calm wisdom helped shape a healthier, cooperative community. One quiet Sunday evening, Noah cast his line from our private dock while Rachel watched the sun sink behind the water. A bass tugged on his rod, and he reeled in his first catch since everything had happened. "Dad, this is the best fishing spot ever," he said, his smile genuine. The shadows of his earlier trauma finally faded. From a $600 fine, Gloria lost her power, her reputation, and her freedom. And I gained something I never planned for: a lake my family could enjoy without interference, a broken bar unless the fish decided to file a lawsuit. Looking back, they tried to squeeze me for $600. I answered by paying off $15,000, exposing their fraud, and taking the whole lake. Maybe the real lesson is this: when people twist the rules to abuse others, the only way to win is to flip the board entirely. If you're still here, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to support Anna Dramanest, you can always tap that little thanks button below. Until next time, keep your waters calm, and your neighbors honest. Thanks for watching Anna Dramanest. Share this with someone who appreciates a good twist, and don't forget to subscribe.